astronauts, it's me, Brandy, and welcome back to Astro-Tarot Research. So I'm doing a astrology video today. Don't worry, I will get back to tarot in a minute. And I know it's been 2 weeks since you have seen my lovely face. I just finished the Black Beauty study. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, please check it out on my channel, Astrology Research, my second channel, and it is linked in this channel's profile. So channels that are available, or you can just search Astrology Research channel and it should pop up. And I just want to thank all you astronauts for your input into the study and letting me know which beautiful women you voted for and wanted into the study, as well as I really appreciate you taking the time to watch the video and interact with it. That video took me about like 2 years from the time that I thought of it, which was in the summer of 2020, back when the pandemic was starting, to its completion in September. So that was a whole 2-year project for the sun sign and the moon sign. So it really did take a lot of time and effort and research, and I really wanted to do a good job. So I really appreciate anybody engaging with my Black Beauty videos and watching it and just being amazing. So thank you, astronauts, again, indulging in my interest, because I know not everyone's into astrology. Before we get started, I do want to remind you to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to follow me on TikTok if you want to see more about my personal life. I do update my TikTok more regularly than I do my channel, and Instagram I should have some more astrology tarot information. I'm already planning a new post for that. And also, I think that's all my social medias. Yeah, just subscribe. This video, I wanted to do a study just based upon my own curiosity. And I know some of you astronauts have also made some suggestions. Don't worry, I have not forgotten those suggestions. It's just that I'm one person. I only got so much time. I will get to some of those suggestions. They were great ideas, but this study was, I guess, personally for me. No one asked for this. This was not something that was highly requested, but I figure a lot of people are very interested about children, especially when it comes to astrology. And one of the things I personally was always interested about is what's something in someone's chart that creates a lot of children. So I conducted a study of over 100+ people to see if there were any patterns. I wanted to see which factors were most important, as well just getting an overall generalized view of signs and nakshatras. Now, I will say in this study, I did not include Mars and Saturn. And the reason for that is because they weren't even a lot of these planets weren't supposed to be in the study in the first place. But because I was going through so many charts, I realized there was a pattern. So I was only going to do Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, and Venus, but then I saw that there was a pattern with Mercury and also a pattern with Jupiter. So I included those in the study. I will at some point in time go back and include Mars and Saturn in the study to see their relevancy and frequency, as well as, you know, what purpose they play within this particular study. Now, if you see me looking down, as always, I am just looking at my notes because there's no way I could memorize a full study in my head. So a little bit more background into this study. This study includes, like I mentioned before, 100+ people who had 4 or more kids. There seemed to be a consensus in Western media that having 4 or more kids was considered a lot. And another thing I would like to mention is that I took the charts of people who had biological children. I did not include people who had like 4 or more children, and let's say they had 4 kids and 2 of them were foster children, but I wouldn't have included them. But if they had 6 kids and 2 of them were foster children, then yeah, I would include them in the study because they had 4 biological kids. So I was looking more so at the biological children factor. Obviously, at some point in time, I'll look at, you know, fostering kids as well. You know, there's so much information I want to study, but so much information, so little time. So let's get into it. The most significant factor thus far when it comes to having 4 or more children is the sign placement of Jupiter. The second most significant factor thus far is the moon house placement. And the third most significant factor is the sun house placement. Secondary grouping and important factors also include the ascendant sign, which house Mercury is located in, and which house Jupiter is located in. The sign placement in which Jupiter was the most dominant and which created the most children was the sign placement of Pisces. Second was the sign placement of Leo. The most popular placement for moon to create a lot of children was moon in the 7th house, and second place, moon in the 5th house. And the third most important factor thus far for sun house placement is sun in the 3rd house or sun in the 5th house. For the secondary grouping of important factors, we have the ascendant sign, with the ascendant sign of Aries being the most popular. For the Mercury house placement, Mercury in the 3rd house was one of the secondary most important factors in terms of house placements. And Jupiter in the 1st house was also the most popular. In terms of sun sign placement did not seem to be a significant factor when indicating who would have more children or a lot of children. It was quite evenly spread. In terms of nakshatra placement, Sun and Revati was the most popular. But as I mentioned before, sign placement and nakshatra placement, the sun seemed to not be significant when it came to nakshatra and when it came to sign placement. When it comes to moon sign placement, there were some signs which were significantly higher than others. The most popular moon sign placement for having a lot of children was Libra, followed by Virgo and Taurus. When it comes to moon sign nakshatra placement, Moon and Swati was number 1. When it comes to the ascendant sign ruler, meaning the planet that rules the ascendant sign and where it was situated in the chart, there was significance. Having the ascendant ruler in the 1st house, having the ascendant ruler in the 3rd house, and having the ascendant ruler in the 9th house were the most popular placements. When it comes to nakshatra placement, ascendant and Bhadrani was the most popular. Venus also showed some patterns, with the most popular placement for Venus being Venus in Aries for sign placement. When it comes to house placements and which house Venus was the most popular in, which would be Venus in the 4th house and Venus in the 5th house. These two placements were pretty much side by side throughout the study. When it comes to Venus nakshatra sign, Venus in Mrigashira was the most popular nakshatra placement. When it comes to Mercury's sign placement, it has some slight significance. Mercury in Scorpio was the most popular sign placement for Mercury. When it comes to nakshatra placements, Mercury in the nakshatra of Anuradha was the most popular placement by far. And I would say this placement is significant because of the amount of charts which had Mercury and Anuradha. Lastly, as we go to Jupiter, when it comes to nakshatra placements, having Jupiter and Uttara Bhadrapada or having Jupiter and Uttara Falguni were the two most significant placements. Now, let's get into my thoughts, and I don't really want to make this long because why bother? You guys just want the results, but here's my thoughts just in case you're curious. Here are some things that I found unsurprising. Jupiter in its own sign of Pisces giving the results of having lots of children. Jupiter is the karka of children, so it is not surprising that its sign placement or one of its sign placements, house placements, or nakshatras has significant results. In fact, Jupiter was Jupiter's sign placement was the most significant factor, and its house placement made it into the secondary important factors when it came to the study. So it does line up to with astrology, as Jupiter is the karka of children. Another thing which was unsurprising, as Jupiter being in Uttara Falguni, which is the second cow ruled nakshatra besides Uttara Falguni, and they are both known for their fertility. And as you know, if you see my Black Beauty study, Uttara Falguni, at least its sun sign and its moon sign, was known for being one of the most attractive placements, at least for Black women. And I know Claire Nocta did another study on it where Uttara Falguni came up as a popular placement for attractiveness for men. And there have been studies showing that the attractability factor is correlated to having successful fertility, if that makes sense. If I'm phrasing it right. I know it makes sense, it's just I don't know if I'm phrasing it right. Generally, people who are perceived to be attractive have more success in having children. And Uttara Bhadrapada, I know it is associated with fertility as well. Another thing that was very unsurprising is having Jupiter in the 5th house. The 5th house is the sign placement known for, not the sign placement, the house placement known for children. People always say the 5th house is associated with children, so it makes sense. You have the karka of the 5th house in the 5th house. Yeah, you're probably going to have a strong desire to have a lot of children. As well as Jupiter in the 1st house makes a lot of sense to me, as people generally see their children as a legacy and a reflection of themselves. As well as I've mentioned before, the ascendant sign becomes about the person's whole life and their whole kind of mindset. So having Jupiter in the 1st house means that children will play a very important role in this native's. And obviously having Jupiter in your 1st house, one of the indications, as this is clearly showing, shows that people tend to want to make their lives about children, or children become a significant factor in their lives. So that result was non-surprising at all. And Jupiter in the 9th house, well, that's just Jupiter in its own sign placement, own house placement, I should say, right? It is also the 5th from the 5th. So it is like the karka of the 5th house, meaning it has some of the same characteristics and meaning of the 5th house. It's like a higher version of the 5th house. It is associated with similar things of the 5th house. So that is also not very surprising at all. So Jupiter was probably the least surprising result so far, and I love that we get that astrological confirmation. Results that I was surprised by would be the Mercury results, because I did not think Mercury was a significant factor when it came to having lots of children. Mercury, in my studies, from what I have researched and what I have learned, no one has mentioned Mercury when it comes to having kids. But as you can see in this study, Mercury is very, very much important when it comes to whether you want to have children or not. And especially Mercury in Anuradha, which is in the sign of Scorpio in Vedic astrology. I did not expect this result for that, because far as I know, Anuradha is not associated with fertility. I have seen it associated with sex and sexuality, as well as promiscuity, or just generally liking to enjoy sexuality. I've seen it for that, but I guess I never put two and two together. Yeah, if you engage in sexual activity a lot, then yeah, more than likely you may end up with some children. But you know, Mercury there, because Mercury is like that placement of communication, you don't really associate that with having a lot of children. And especially since the other result with Mercury being in its own house placements being very significant as well. So it's interesting how Mercury in the 3rd house and Mercury in the 6th house also created a lot of children, perhaps having a strong Mercury or a Mercury that feels at home, where you are expanding your communication and expanding your knowledge, because children are technically, if you have them, you'll end up, and you take care of them, you will end up expanding your mindset and you will end up expanding your knowledge. So in a way, it can be seen that way. I would definitely like to branch off and study the people who specifically had Mercury in their 3rd and 6th house, and especially the people who had their Mercury in Anurata, because I did not have Mercury involved in the study until it started coming up quite frequently. Like, it's hard not to notice. As I was saying, yes, it is. So that to me was very interesting to realize the importance of Mercury when it comes to having children. Whenever I see Mercury ruled nakshatra, people, when they write things, when they act in things, when they create things, I noticed there was a pattern of having a lot of people around, versus like if I see some work or art or some creative project by somebody who maybe like K2 ruled, there's less interaction, less people, more isolation, you know, like more pandemic vibes, right? More like being in your own world, versus, as I said, with the mercurial things, mercurial nakshatras, there's a lot more interactions. And I know when you interact more with people, that does grow your intellect or grows your mindset and perspective, the more people that you encounter and interact with. So perhaps the charts having this emphasis on Mercury for being in the 3rd house, being in the 6th house, meaning that there's going to more than likely be some strong emphasis on communicating with a lot of people on a regular basis, or just having lots and lots of communication. And in this case, that could be connecting, that would be connecting to children. So that was shocking. But then we also see that 3rd house connection with the sun as well. So highlighting the importance of Mercury in the 3rd house and communication when it comes to having children. So, or in skills too. So I guess you would increase your skills because you got to teach children. So, you know, if you're really raising your kids, then you're teaching them things. So, and I do know sun in the 3rd house is a good placement for someone who can be like an authority, who teaches a subject. So, you know, surprising results for me. I never thought about a connection to Mercury. So for me, it was like, wow. And then we did have the Aries sign placement energy with Venus and the ascendant. I don't know if that's surprising or not. I don't know how to feel about that one. I guess I don't have any feelings or thoughts really on that. To me, it just kind of feels like the thing that people say when they say children are your legacy or extension of yourself or your reflection of you, things like that. And I would imagine people having strong Aries placements would have a strong desire to have more of themselves out in the world, because Aries is about the self. But then at the same time, we also have Moon in the 7th house being the most popular house placement, and that's the house of other people. So so that's interesting as well. The fact that the house of other people, when the moon goes into there, so the mind goes into thinking about others. So it is interesting that we have that balance. We have that balance of self, but we have that balance of other people. You guys, this needs like a second study attached to it. But that is what I have for you guys. Like I said, I didn't want to get too deep into it because when it comes to like reasoning and thought process and all of that, I would really have to look into the people who had these placements and why they decided to make these certain choices. But I thought that you guys would want to know, because I know a lot of people want kids. Some people want big families. Heck, I might even do one for people who don't have that many kids. But until then, I'll see you next time. Au revoir.